Alrighty, what is going on everybody? It is Mr. Buddy here, bringing you guys another one of my discussion videos. So in these discussion videos, I just kind of want to sort of discuss and talk about really just various ideas and thoughts I've had on kind of gaming related topics. As you can probably already tell, I'm doing this video entirely scriptless. So, if that offends or enrages you, then I would suggest just leaving the video now, because it's probably only going to get worse from here on out. I've done this opening so many times that I'm sort of okay at doing this, but after the opening, who knows, there'll probably be like really weird pauses and probably lots of coughing and so if you're annoyed or you don't like that, then I would suggest just leaving the video now, because I definitely understand that. I totally get it. Alrighty, a quick disclaimer before we get started, but I am sort of going to have to play both of the sides of the argument that is in this video. With this topic, which is, should Pokemon versions have more differences? There's sort of two sides to this, and I'm kind of going to be playing both sides of that argument. Even though I do personally think that they should have more differences, I can definitely see why people would think the other way, so I'm also going to be sort of trying to play the other side of that argument. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Yes, it is. Until I find some sort of Pokemon woman out there for me, I'm going to have to do like two-sided arguments alone, so... Just forget I said anything. Alright, so let's jump right into the discussion now. Should Pokemon versions have more differences between them? So historically, the Pokemon franchise has always had two mainline versions of their games in each generation. Dating back to Generation 1, there was, for every red, we've had a blue, for every gold, there's a silver, for every ruby, a sapphire, and so on. It's been this way since the start of the franchise, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be this way until the end of the Pokemon franchise. I mean, however many years away that is, I'm pretty sure that they will always have two mainline game versions available. And I totally see where they're coming from. It makes them a lot of money. It's pretty fun to kind of have, I guess, sort of that social friend element to it where, you buy, let's say, X version, your friend buys Y, then you can trade between each other. That's pretty cool to do. So, I mean, two versions has worked for a while, or I guess it's worked pretty well for, the whole time they've been doing it, and I don't really have any qualms or issues with that, except I'm starting to feel like they should have more differences between the versions. Now, dating back to the first Pokemon games in Generation 1, the version differences have not been too significant. Sorry, I have a list written down here. Let me pull this up. Alrighty, here we go. So, really, in Generation 1, the only differences between the games they had were, if my list is right, and I hope it is, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it was just version-exclusive Pokemon. Such as, like, I believe that Kakuna, Metapod, or I guess Caterpie and Weedle are the first forms. I believe that those are exclusive, and that's carried on since, Generation 6. Even X and Y have done that. So, I mean, we've come to expect that, so that's not really a big game-changing exclusive difference, So moving on, the next big difference we got in the games was in, I believe, Generation 3, where they still had kind of the exclusive Pokemon, but they also had kind of exclusive teams, where if you were playing Pokemon Ruby, you were able to fight Team Magma, and if you were playing Pokemon Sapphire, you were able to fight Team Aqua. Now, this didn't change a whole lot. I mean, it kind of changed up the story a little bit. It sort of changed up, like, what you were fighting. I think Archie had Sharpedo, Maxie had Camerupt, so I mean it did change it up a little bit, but really it didn't change up kind of the core gameplay. Like, if you bought one version, you never felt like you needed to buy the other. It wasn't that big of a change. Now, coming up to Generation 5 and 6, the exclusive differences have been a little bit bigger. I think that Generation 5 had the biggest amount of sort of version-exclusive differences, or really just version differences in general. In Generation 5, different towns had different aesthetics depending on which game you were playing. There's also exclusive gym leaders in the form of Iris and Drayden, who were changed. It changed which one you fought depending on your version. And also, I believe that there's also kind of exclusive locations, which were the Black Tower and the White Forest. Or I guess it's... Sorry, I'm getting my games fixed up. In Black and White, it was the Black City and the White Forest. And then in Black 2 and White 2, it was the Black Tower and the White Tree Hollow. And then I guess kind of one more exclusive thing I should probably mention is they also kind of had different challenge modes. Whereas, I'm blanking on which one received which, but one of the versions, when you beat the game, you got an easy mode, and the other version got a hard mode or a challenge mode when you beat the game. You could trade those with each other too to kind of emphasize that whole trading aspect of the versions, but each version did get only one of those modes. And coming up on Generation 6, kind of the last big difference that we are really getting between versions is they've made some Mega Stones version exclusives. So all in all, these are really all of the changes we've had, or all of the differences, in versions. And, I mean, as you can see, it's really nothing too big or too crazy. Now, to kind of play the part of a person who is supporting no big changes, it's good. It really can be good to not have too many different changes or, version exclusive things. I totally get that. But at least, in my opinion, I really want them to do kind of like a big change between the versions, like something bigger, like maybe a different story between the two versions, where if you play, for instance, like, this is all hypothetical, but maybe you're playing Pokemon Moon, and you have a different story than Pokemon Sun, if that was the other version, that was released at the time. I mean, that's just an example, like a brand new story between the games. Now, before I get too far caught up in kind of my ideas and stuff for this, let's take a look at really what kind of inspired me to really start thinking about this, and that is Fire Emblem Fates, which is the latest Fire Emblem game that just came out in Japan, I think a couple weeks ago, and it's supposed to be coming out internationally pretty soon. But Fire Emblem Fates did something brand new to the series in that it actually had two versions of the game available. Now, Fire Emblem is like the last game I would ever expect to do two versions, so it struck me as odd that they would do that, but, sorry, one sec. Alright, sorry, just taking a drink, my throat is getting all dry. Oh, it feels like I swallowed a desert. Alrighty, so what they did is the differences between these two Fire Emblem games, which are Fire Emblem Fates Birthright and Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, is that, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to hear that a lot throughout this video, but I believe that they actually, up until about, I think, Chapter 4 or 5, the games play exactly the same. But from, I believe, Chapter 6 onwards, the games go in completely different directions. With Fire Emblem Birthright, you are siding with, I believe, the... I'm not sure the names of them, so I'm not even going to try, but with Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, you're siding with one army, and with Conquest, you're siding with the other. Now, this has lots of different things it does. It changes, the entire story from that point forward. It changes, what characters you get to talk to and use, what classes, I believe, weapons. It changes everything, so it really does feel, from what I've heard, I have not played it yet, but I've heard that it feels a lot like an actual, different game almost, or really like, two different stories inside of one game. And I think that that is really cool, and this got me to thinking, if Fire Emblem Fates, which is the last game I would ever expect to do kind of like a branched story like this, could do something with two different versions like this, why couldn't, a mainline Pokemon game do something like this that actually has bigger changes and differences to it? And so really that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is would you guys like it if Pokemon versions actually had bigger changes, such as like different stories and stuff in it? Now, I've come up with a couple examples. They are not great by any means. I'm sure you guys will tear them apart and say I'm awful for thinking of them. I'm expecting that, so cut away at me or whatever. But really, I've come up with a couple examples of what I would sort of like to see in really a bigger, or sorry, excuse me, I'm brain farting over here. What I would like to see in Pokemon versions that have more differences and bigger differences in them. So one example is I'm going to use kind of the Unova games for this. Sorry, real quick, let me pull up my Unova map so I don't get anything wrong here, because I would hate to look like an idiot with Unova, because I do enjoy Unova a lot. So I'm looking at the Unova map. Sorry, alrighty, there we go. Just pull it up. So looking at the Unova map, I'm solely going off of the original games, but as we all know, in the original games, you start right here in this city. And I mean, that's all great, but I mean, what if this is all hypothetical. I mean, heaven forbid, if we ever get a black 3 and a white 3, they could do something like this. But what if, in a hypothetical black 3 and white 3, you start at this town, and you progress along the game normally until you get to Nimbasa City, which is right here, which is right in the center. And then what if, once again, all hypothetical, I've got to stress this is all hypothetical, but what if, in, like, for instance, the black 3, you went left to, I forget the name of that city, you went left and you had to go around the circle this way, and what if in a white 3, for example, you went right and went around the city that way? I mean, I know this does feel like a very minor change, and it is granted not the best example, but this is sort of the kind of change that I'd like to see, where this would actually influence and kind of change the gameplay between the games. I mean, in Black 3, you would be going kind of to the west of the region. You would find different exclusive Pokemon. I believe that the Dragon Spiral Tower, hopefully I'm saying that right, or hopefully I've even remembered that right. I believe that that tower is over on the left side of the region, so if you have Black 3, you could get access to Dragon types earlier, while if you went east in White 3, you would be kind of on near, I guess, Undella Town, so maybe you could get Water types earlier over there. I mean, this is just an example, and this is by no means the best, but this sort of illustrates kind of like a bigger change I'd like to see between versions, where, I mean, you'd still get kind of the base games, and they'd still have, I guess, relatively the same story, but it would change sort of like what you do and where you go in kind of a region, and I think that that could be really cool to do and see. Now, I have one other example for, like, a monumental, massive change that, I mean, this is going to be just insane, and I totally recognize that. And really, the only way I can do these hypotheticals is to think of sequels to past games, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But what if, this is gonna sound super dumb, but what if they made a sequel to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire? Now, I know you guys are probably all laughing at me internally, and that's great, but what if they made a sequel to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but it was sort of an alternate universe where the evil teams in those games had succeeded? So in Omega Ruby 2, Team Magma would have succeeded and unleashed Groudon, and it would have turned the whole region of Hoenn into a wasteland, while in Alpha Sapphire 2, Team Aqua would have succeeded and used Kyogre to pretty much flood the entire Hoenn region. Now, I know that nobody would ever buy the Alpha Sapphire because water, insert too much water joke here, I guess, but, I mean, imagine that these were two versions of the game where you're sort of doing something similar, but it would just feel totally different from each other. Now, I am not saying in any way that this is remotely possible or even plausible. This is so much work on Game Freak's part that I know they would never do anything like this. But this sort of illustrates kind of the bigger change I would like to see between Pokemon versions. I mean, imagine, like, if there was this big of a change between versions, I really would want to get both versions of the game just to experience probably, like, the different regions and the different story that would probably come. And that's kind of one of my biggest gripes right now. Like, I'm happy that I don't... Sorry, let me back up to sort of rephrase this thought. Like, right now, I have never felt the need to actually get both versions of a Pokemon game. And, I mean, that's for good reason, obviously, because, really, Game Freak has made the games so similar but has minor differences that I've never felt like I needed to get both to really experience the entire game, and I'm happy for that because I don't have to spend more money. Like, when I bought Soul Silver, I never felt the need to get Heart Gold to get, like, Ho-Oh and probably a minor Pokemon like, a Sentret or something. I'm not sure what the exclusives in Heart Gold and Soul Silver are. Sorry, I was taking another drink there. So I've never felt the need to get kind of both versions of the game, and I am thankful to Game Freak for that. But if they actually made like a monumentally big difference, like having these kind of post-apocalyptic regions, I actually would want to kind of buy both games and experience them. I mean, if they were as long as a traditional Pokemon game, I would totally go all in and get both of these versions of the games. At that point, though, like, I mean, you have to think, though, if these games are so different, are they really versions of each other, though? I mean, is a flooded Hoenn really the same as a wasteland Hoenn? I mean, at that point, it really isn't that big of a difference. Or, sorry, at that point, it is a big difference. Excuse me, that was another brain fart. At that point, it is a big difference, so I don't think they would ever do anything as monumental or crazy as that because, I mean, one, that's so much work to do, and two, I mean, they're not really versions of each other. They really could probably function as, like, just standalone games in a generation that you release, like, 1 year after another, rather than together at the same time. Now, I do have a third example for this that I think could possibly be okay. So, get ready. It's not as ludicrous or crazy as the flooded and wasteland Hoenn, but I think it's sort of crazy in its own way. So getting back to kind of that Pokemon Solar and Lunar, game idea that I had brought up earlier, I think they could do something cool with kind of this idea where if you got kind of the Pokemon Sun or Solar, it had more of an emphasis on daytime and day events, while the Pokemon Moon or Lunar game would have more emphasis on like nighttime and night events. I mean, they could, design the whole region around like, kind of nighttime and daytime stuff, and then, each version would have sort of more exclusive events that could happen in the daytime versus the nighttime. I mean, as somebody who's usually up all night because, God, I don't even know why I'm up all night. I should probably consult a doctor about that. But as someone who's up all night, I would totally go all in for getting like a Pokemon Moon or Lunar version that has more events based kind of on the nighttime side of a hypothetical region like this. I mean, maybe, there's certain places and events that only happen at nighttime, versus, Pokemon Sun or Solar, which has events you can only access during the daytime and stuff like that. I mean, both games would totally play the same, except for, probably some bigger differences based on kind of the time of day you're playing. Now, I know that this doesn't sound like extremely big, but I think that having a difference like this in the game would make it feel, at least to me, a little bit more different than kind of the other version. I mean, my biggest gripe with kind of the modern Pokemon games, such as like X and Y or Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, I mean, I have lots of gripes with them, so I won't share those, but they do sort of end up feeling the same as the other one. At least in X and Y's case. I mean, besides, obviously, like, the different legendary you get in X and Y, I mean, and a couple of exclusive Pokemon, they really did feel kind of the same as each other. So, I mean, I ended up wondering, like, what even pushes a person over the edge to get, the game? Is it just the cover legendary? Because that's sort of a weak reason to get one over the other. So I've just been thinking, I mean, if they did something big like this, like, a whole flooded region versus a wasteland region, or even like day events versus night events, I think it would be kind of a cool change to see just in a mainline Pokemon game. Anyways, this sort of wraps up the discussion. Hopefully I made a little bit of sense. If I didn't, just yell at me in the comments and I'll try and clarify what I mean. But anyways, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments below too, besides ranting and yelling at me, because I'd love to know what you guys think on this. Should we get Pokemon versions that have more differences in them? I mean, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts on this is. I think that it is a potentially good idea that could be really well implemented, but I mean, I don't think they'll ever do anything like this with major changes, but I'm curious to know what you guys think, so feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, you guys, and I will catch you later.